Welcome and thank you for joining the live webinar on overview of MiCA, being organized by MAP S.Platis. My name is Mateo Jarrincubi. I'm the Global Manager for Partners and Media at the Association of Governance, Risk and Compliance, and I will be the moderator of this exciting and highly relevant session. Today's agenda includes two experts who will discuss the regulatory framework governing crypto assets in the EU, focusing on the key provisions of the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, MiCA, and the recast Transfer of Funds Regulation, which entered into force in June 2023. More specifically, this session will provide participants with an overview of the regulatory framework governing crypto assets in the EU, highlighting the key provisions of MiCA and the recast Transfer of Funds Regulation. Following the presentations, we will allow a few minutes for a Q&A session. Now, before we actually get started with everything, I would like to cover a few admin issues. If you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them using the Q&A tab on MS Teams. We will not be monitoring the chat for questions, so if you have any questions as you listen to Kyriakos or Alexandros presenting, please use the Q&A button on Teams. Make sure you also mention who the question is directed to so that we can target it in the proper direction once we reach the Q&A session. Also, we will have a recording of this session. The recording will be available within the next few days, and everyone who attended or who registered for this event will be emailed with a video of the presentation. So please keep that in mind. Okay, so let's get started. Without further ado, I am pleased to welcome our first presenter, Mr. Alexandros Constantinou. Alexandros Constantinou is the Director of Compliance Services of MAP S.Platis. He has extensive experience in advising international financial services organizations on regulatory and compliance matters. Alexandros, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Mateo, and welcome everybody. Good morning. I'm very pleased to be presenting today's exciting seminar on MiCA. There's been quite a few discussions the last few years around it, and we all know the hype that's going on with the cryptos everywhere across the globe. So today's sessions will not be covering in detail all requirements of MiCA. We'll be looking at the most important elements of MiCA, trying to give to you an understanding on what is MiCA, what it tries to achieve, what it really regulates, have a look at some of the basic and most important requirements for each activity that is covered. And as Mateo mentioned in the end, if you have any questions and we have enough time to cover those, we'll try to address it. So let me start sharing my presentation. Okay.
Yep, perfect.
Great. So before MiCA was introduced, which was last month, actually has become effective. So the EU regulatory landscape looked very fragmented and very inconsistent. The crypto industry was largely unregulated, as you know. Maybe some crypto assets which have qualified as financial instruments, MiFID financial instruments, have been regulated, but the majority of the industry was largely unregulated. A few years ago, via the issuance of the 5th AML directive, some of the activity has come into the scope of the AML rules in the EU, but this was quite limited. It only covers custodian wallet providers and exchange services between virtual currencies and fiat currencies. But as you know, the activity that's going on in the crypto sector is much more wide, so it didn't cover all types of activity. We had some EU countries that adopted bespoke national rules on cryptos, but that was limited to their territory. It did not provide for an EU-wide passporting regime. The market, as we said, was quite fragmented. It was not providing for a level playing field. There was significant divergence between jurisdictions and the rules. And lastly, banks, EMIs, payment institutions, investment firms were quite generally excluded from offering themselves services on crypto assets. So MiCA is trying to address all these issues. It provides specific rules that it provides specific rules on issues that are not covered by current rules. So it's more of a gap-filling regulation. It attempts to minimize the risk of holders of crypto assets, especially in areas of consumer protection where the current rules don't cover it. It prevents risk to market integrity, including in terms of market abuse and financial crimes. It attempts to increase user confidence in trading crypto assets, provides legal certainty. There was quite a lot of legal uncertainty with crypto assets and across jurisdictions. It abolishes the regulatory fragmentation and possibilities of arbitrage and fosters competition among market participants. It provides equal opportunities and proportionate treatment among market participants and promotes financial stability and smooth operation of payment. And finally, it attempts to address monetary policy risks arising from stable coins. We'll also cover what stable coins are later on. So the markets in crypto asset regulation, which is coined as MiCA or MiCA, is an EU-level legal framework that regulates crypto assets and services related to crypto assets carried out in the EU, and is designed to complement existing regulation. It will require a level of professionalism that many issuers and players in this market have not been familiar with. It's important to also know that MiCA does not regulate the underlying technology. It doesn't specify requirements on how technology should be built. It regulates the product and the service of this technology. So when does MiCA enters into force? So most of the requirements that apply on the 30th of December next year, with the exception of the requirements relating to stable coins, which apply 6 months sooner. That means on the 30th of June next year. The accompanied transfer of funds regulation, which now covers also crypto assets, also starts applying on the 30th of December next year. MiCA takes the form of a regulation and not a directive, so there is no requirement to transpose that into national laws. So the text is directly applicable across the EU in a harmonized way. Many of MiCA's technical aspects, though, are still subject to further developments through the issuance of regulatory and implementing standards. We have seen the first ESMA consultation package, which was issued a few days ago. And we expect a lot of more work in this area, as there are a lot of issues that need to be still covered. So that was as an introduction to MiCA. So in the next few slides, we'll be looking at the scope of MiCA, to whom it's applicable, what it tries to regulate, what it doesn't try to regulate. So MiCA applies, in general, MiCA applies to natural and legal persons. that are engaged in issuing or offering to the public or cryptos that are admitted to trading, so listed in exchanges, or provide services related to crypto assets. It's important to understand some of the terminology we just saw. So an issuer of a crypto asset is an entity that issues crypto assets and have control over their creation. An offeror is a person that, or an entity, including the issuer, who offers those crypto assets to the public. An offer to the public essentially means communications in any form and by any means, presenting information to prospective holders on whether to decide to purchase those crypto assets. And admission to trading refers to admissions of crypto assets on a trading platform, meaning an exchange. The definition of a trading platform follows a similar definition included in MiFID, which is basically multilateral system which brings together third-party interest on purchase and selling crypto assets by resulting in an exchange of the crypto assets for funds or exchange of crypto assets with other crypto assets. So let's look at now the definition on what is a crypto asset under MiCA. So this is a quite wide definition. MiCA defines crypto assets as any digital representation of value or rights which may be transferred and stored electronically using distributed ledger technology or similar technology. MiCA provides definitions regarding what is a distributed ledger technology or a distributed ledger and other relevant definitions, but we will not get into the technical aspects of that. So as you can see, this is a quite wide definition that attempts to capture all types of crypto assets that are basically using technologies on a distributed ledger. It's important to clarify and mention that MiCA differentiates between three groups of crypto assets, each of which a separate set of requirements apply. So the first group that MiCA defines is asset reference tokens, which is a crypto asset that is not an e-money token and purports to maintain stable value by referring another value or right or a combination thereof. So you create an asset reference token is a crypto that it maintains stable value by referring to other assets, okay? Or for example, a basket of currencies. It's important to distinguish that this should not qualify as an e-money token. And an asset reference token is part of the category of stable coins that you may have heard or traded before, some of you. The second category is e-money tokens, which are crypto assets that purport to maintain a stable value by referring to the value of one official currency, irrespective of the country of that official currency, as long as it's issued by a central bank. So for instance, it may be euro, the British pound, US dollar, and other currencies. So if you have, the difference between the two is that if you have a crypto asset that refers to one official currency that is an e-money token, and cannot refer only to one official currency because that will qualify it as an e-money token. And arts are those cryptocurrencies that refer to various assets, okay, or values. Both of them purport to maintain a stable value. So both of them are categorized as stable coins. The third category of crypto assets that is defined by MiCA is a catch-all type of category that aims to cover all other types of crypto assets which are not arts or EMTs, including utility tokens. For simplicity purposes, we will call the third category as utility tokens. And it's important to understand what is a utility token. A utility token means a type of crypto asset that is only intended to provide access to a good or service supplied by its issuer. Let's have a look at some more details regarding the stable coins, EMTs, and arts. So the definition of an e-money token captures all types of crypto assets that refer to a single currency, as we mentioned. It is usually used for making payments. So if you have used Tether before, which is pegged to the US dollar, so you usually use it to make payments. The MiCA deems electronic money tokens as electronic money as per the definition of the Electronic Money Directive, which some of you may be familiar with. But to help you understand the concept of electronic money, I'm providing a definition here as per the one included in the e-money directive, which means an electronically, including magnetically stored monetary value as presented by a claim to the issuer, which is issued in receipt of funds for the purpose of making payment transactions. So if you have used PayPal before, let's say, or Skrill, or if you have a Revolut, let's say, account, so you have a balance. That balance is basically an electronic money, and you can send the funds from their applications to other users. Or if you have used, let's say, prepaid cards, which you can store the value of your funds in that prepaid card, you can, this also is considered electronic money. It's important to also know that if an e-money token references an official currency of an EU member state, automatically it's considered to be deemed to be offered in the public in the EU. As regards asset reference tokens, those covers crypto assets, which are not, as we said, EMTs, whose value is backed by assets, and is quite wide definition in order to avoid circumvention and make MiCA future-proof in case, for example, other technologies are used in the future or other type of asset reference token are issued in the future, which are not in circulation at the moment. Asset reference tokens usually are used as a means of exchange or to transfer value, as opposed to e-money tokens, which are usually used for making payments. So we have seen that MiCA regulates crypto asset issuers and offers, right? And whenever those crypto assets are listed on exchanges, it also regulates that activity. And finally, it regulates also the provision of services related to crypto assets, which we'll look at a later stage. We have seen what is a crypto asset, which is a digital representation of value of rights. which may be transferred and stored electronically. And we saw the three different types of crypto assets. Now let's have a look at what's not within the scope of MiCA. Okay, so so we said cryptocurrencies, stable coins, utility tokens, and CASPs are within scope of MiCA. CASP refers to crypto asset service provider, those providing services on crypto assets. Now, with respect to cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, of course, Bitcoin, for example, is not regulated per se under MiCA, but if you are a provider of services in relation to such cryptocurrencies, you will be regulated. So NFTs are out of scope if you have heard the term non-fungible or token, including sound-bound tokens. We will look at that in more detail in the next few slides. But it's important to mention that crypto assets that qualify as one or more of the followings are not within the scope of MiCA. So if you have a crypto asset that qualified as a MiFID financial instrument, that will not be regulated by MiCA, but it will be regulated by the MiFID directive, right? So if you have, for example, a crypto asset that is a security token, so you create a crypto asset that represents, let's say, a share of which is listed, let's say. So that is going to be considered most likely a financial instrument, right? And anybody that offers services, for example, on that crypto asset will need to be an investment firm under the MiFID directive. And for example, other rules may apply for the issuance of that crypto asset, for example, the prospectus directive. Deposits, including structured deposits, are also excluded from the scope of MiCA. Funds, for example, banknotes, coins, and e-money, except of course if they qualify as EMTs are not within the scope of MiCA. Securitization positions, non-life or life insurance contracts, pension products and schemes, and social security schemes are also not included within the scope of MiCA. Also, if you provide services intra-group, you are excluded from MiCA. And activities that some public entities like central banks, for example, may be carrying out are also excluded. Digital assets issued by central banks are also not within the scope of MiCA. For example, the digital euro that is planned to be issued by the central bank of the European Central Bank. But of course, if you provide services, let's say you are a private company providing services on the digital euro, most likely you likely fall in the scope of MiCA for the provision of those services. But in relation to the issuance of digital assets by central banks, this is not included. If you are a vendor of hardware or software for non-custodial wallets, you are also excluded from the scope of MiCA. So if you have heard or have seen some USB drives that may store crypto assets on them. So if you are a vendor of such hardware devices, then you are not within the scope of MiCA. And also lending and borrowing activities not also covered by MiCA. If you have also heard of staking, where you pledge your crypto assets to be used for the blockchain, again, this is not included within the scope, at least at the moment. But let's have a look at some more important issues regarding the scope of MiCA. So you may have heard the term DeFi or decentralized finance. So generally, MiCA does not attempt to regulate fully decentralized activities. For example, if you are a decentralized exchange, you may have heard the term where there is possibility to obtain services which exchange crypto assets to fiat on a decentralized manner, where there is no a central controller of that exchange. So that kind of activity will fall outside the scope. Or decentralized autonomous organizations are also generally within out of scope. But if part of the activity is performed only on a decentralized manner, it's possible that it will be coming to scope. So if you have, let's say, a decentralized exchange, but somebody is benefiting from it, for example, earning out of the transactions that happen on the decentralized blockchain, so that that could possibly fall within scope. So there's a lot of discussion in respect to activities carried out on a decentralized manner, and each activity will have to be considered on a case-by-case basis. As you may know, we have crypto assets that are issued also in a decentralized manner. So Bitcoin that we mentioned before, there is no a single issuer, okay, on Bitcoin. So in that case, issuance of crypto assets without a single issuer, such as Bitcoins, are not part of MiCA scope, and no requirements will apply. But as we mentioned before, if you are offering services, for example, you offer services to exchange Bitcoins into fiat currencies or exchange Bitcoins into other crypto assets, so you will be regulated for the services you provide in relation to such crypto assets. Non-fungible tokens, we mentioned before that they are excluded within from the scope. So let's look at what are non-fungible tokens. So non-fungible tokens need to be unique and non-fungible with other crypto assets. So if you offer a crypto asset that are at a fixed price that are not fungible on cinema tickets, let's say digital art or digital collectibles of clothing brands, or in-game items in computer games, those are exempted from the scope of MiCA. You can have a digital, an NFT, a non-fungible token, which represents services or physical assets that are unique and non-fungible, on also product guarantees or real estate. So you could, for example, tokenize, right, a real estate, for example, a house under an NFT. So that NFT, so you tokenize that house, that NFT represent this specific house at this location, right? That will be excluded from the MiCA scope. There will not be requirements applying to NFTs. But of course, or if you, let's say you create a digital art on your computer, you can tokenize that digital art on and wrap it as NFT on the blockchain. So you can that again will not be included within scope, but there might be exception to those rules. So for example, if you create a single NFT that represents the real estate that we talked about, that will be excluded. But if you create multiple NFTs which fragment each one representing a fragment of that, let's say, real estate property that you have tokenized, then that is likely to fall within scope of MiCA. So authorities should apply substance over form. So the features of the crypto asset determine whether it becomes regulated or not. and not how the issuer calls it or designates it. So it's important to make that distinction. So most NFTs will likely fall outside the scope, but there could potentially be NFTs that will fall within the scope of MiCA. So we talked also about soundbound tokens called the so-called NFTs, soundbound. Those are digital assets that cannot be transferred to one person to another. So those do not fall under the definition and are excluded from the scope of MiCA. For example, loyalty schemes. You go to the supermarket, there is a loyalty scheme. The more you spend, the more points you collect, let's say, and you can exchange these points with the supermarket to obtain some products. Those kind of tokens, crypto tokens, will not fall within the scope of MiCA. If you have heard of crypto airdrops and rewards, also those are excluded. So if you offer basically utility tokens for free, this is excluded. Or if you create a reward, automatic reward. So when you do staking, so when you pledge your cryptos to the blockchain, you may earn some rewards, right? So those rewards, the issuance of those rewards are excluded within scope from the scope of MiCA. It's important though to note that those crypto assets will not be considered as offered for free in respect to airdrops, the so-called airdrops, if the holder of those crypto assets will be required to provide to the issuer his personal data, okay, or if the issuer and offeror receives any fees or commissions in respect to that crypto asset. So if somebody wants to create such crypto assets, he will need to make sure, if he and wants to be excluded from the scope of MiCA, he will need to make sure that those conditions are met, meaning not to obtain the personal data in exchange for that crypto asset, and not to obtain any fees or commissions or other monetary or non-monetary benefits. And it's important to know that it only applies to utility tokens, not EMTs or ARTs. So if you are issuer of utility tokens, okay, which provide access to existing goods or services, again, you do not fall within the scope of MiCA, okay? Or if you are a holder of crypto assets that have a right to use those crypto assets to exchange goods and services to a limited network of merchants, again, that will be excluded. However, those exceptions will not apply in respect to stored goods not intended to be collected by the purchaser, or in the case of growing limited networks, and also those exceptions will cease to apply when there is an intention to be listed or has been listed. So let's say you create a token that can be used to exchange an existing to be exchanged for obtaining an existing service or good. Okay, if this service or good exists, then you do not need to apply MiCA's requirements with respect to utility tokens. So if you basically create a token where the proceeds from the sale of that token will be used to fund future projects, for example, so a non-existing good or service, then you fall within the scope of MiCA's requirements regarding utility tokens. Okay, this is the distinction here. So let's now look at the specific requirements for those that issue stable coins and utility tokens that fall within the scope of MiCA. So if you are an issuer of any crypto asset or offerer of crypto assets, right, you need to publish the so-called white paper, which is a representation, is a document basically that describes and needs to include a lot of information regarding the project, regarding the issuer, regarding the risks involved. It's, if you have come across before the prospectuses that issuers of traditional financial products issue, this is a similar type of document, of course, with a bit of less information and more relevant information to crypto assets, including the relevant technology that is being used. So so if you are an issuer of crypto assets, you need to issue a white paper and give it to the prospective holder. There is an exception in case for utility tokens, for exempted utility tokens that we will be looking at. You do not need to obtain approval from the National Competent Authority for the white paper you issue, unless, of course, unless you issue an asset reference token. If you plan to list your on exchanges your crypto assets, then you need to follow several listing obligations. Your marketing communications need to be compliant with the rules of MiCA for all types of crypto asset issuance. You do not need to obtain approval from the authorities for your marketing communication before those are published, but you may need to be notifying them on request of the authorities. You need to obtain authorization under MiCA only if you issue asset reference token, unless you are a bank. So a bank, a credit institution, will not need to obtain authorization to issue arts, but will need to notify, of course, authorities. If you are issuing e-money tokens, the issuance of e-money tokens is only limited by banks and EMI. So you need to be authorized as an EMI or as a bank to be able to issue e-money tokens. And you do not need any authorization to issue utility tokens. MiCA provides for the possibility of passporting. So if you are authorized to issue a token in one member state, you can offer your crypto assets to the public in the rest of member states. There are safeguarding requirements, so you need to keep separate the funds you collect from holders of crypto assets and segregate them from your own funds. In respect of utility token, this only applies for a limited period until the offer basically expires. Then obviously the issuer can use those to fund the projects that he's as per the prescription of the specific crypto asset. If you are a retail holder, you have the right to withdraw for a certain period of time your subscription to a utility token. MiCA creates liabilities legal liabilities to issuers of crypto assets with respect to the information given to the white paper by the issuer. So in case a holder loses money and the loss is related to misinformation, for example, so there could be liability on the issuers, and they will possibly have to repay back the holder of the crypto asset. If you are an issuer of an asset reference token or an e-money token, you need to be established in the EU and have your registered office in the EU. If you are an issuer of a utility token, you do not need to be established in the EU, but you can be. So you can be established in a third country, and you plan to issue a utility token to fund a specific project that gives the holder the right to a specific goods or service. So you will be able to be established outside the EU, and you have to just notify the authorities or in the jurisdictions that you plan to offer your token in Europe, and inform them that you plan to issue this token and send them your white paper. Issuers of arts and EMTs will also have own funds requirements. In case you are an issuer of arts, you need to have a reserve of the assets that crypto assets represent. So we said that asset reference token attempt to maintain the value of this token by referencing specific assets, right? So the assets that art is referencing to need to be held by the issuer as reserves, okay? So you cannot sell naked, let's say, asset reference token. They need to be backed up by the relevant reserves. In case of course, e-money tokens, which are pegged with a specific currency, obviously that currency will, that e-money token will represent on a one-to-one basis. So if let's say you issue an e-money token based on euro, right? You will be collecting for every one of those crypto assets €1. So that the amount of tokens that you issue. So if you are issuing 10 million euro of an e-money token, and you collect from the holders 10 million euros, you need to keep those again safeguarded and segregated from your own funds, as per obviously the e-money directive requirements. You need to have complaints handling procedures if you are an issuer of arts, and also based on the requirements of the e-money directive, in case you issue e-money tokens. There might be regulatory reportings, especially for issuers of arts. In case of issuers of arts and EMTs, the holder of the asset has the right to redeem that crypto asset and collect basically back fiat currency based on the value of that crypto asset. If you issue arts or EMTs, you cannot offer interest to the holders. So we said that deposits are excluded from the scope of MiCA. So if you offer interest rates to holders of your crypto asset, that is likely to be considered a deposit. So it's forbidden to offer interest like banks offer to account holders. You need to have internal governance arrangements. You need to notify authorities in case of changes to the management. You need to have procedures for the identification, prevention, and management of conflicts of interest. You have to give specific ongoing information to holders if you are an issuer of arts. All types of crypto assets have a fiduciary duty to holders, so you need to act in the best interest of your clients first and not your own. And it's important to know that the issuers of crypto assets need to have a legal entity form. Okay, all of issuers of crypto assets that qualify under MiCA need to take the form of a legal entity. So these are some of the general requirements. Obviously, we're not going into detail into every single requirement here. There is a lot prescribed in MiCA and a lot more to be issued. But it gives you an idea on what will be the requirements, or in case you want to issue an offer to the public, such crypto assets. So in case you issue utility tokens, some provisions, for example, the preparation of a white paper will not apply in case of they're offering these to fewer than 150 persons per member state, or the offer does not exceed 1 million euros for a 12-month period, or when the offer of the utility token is addressed to qualified investors. The definition of qualified investor is the one included in the MiFID directive. In case you are an issuer of an asset reference token, you do not need to obtain an authorization under MiCA if your outstanding value of arts never exceeds 5 million euros over a period of 12 months, or if your arts are offered only and held only by qualified investors. Of course, some of the requirements of MiCA, for example, to draft the white paper, will still apply to issuers of such arts. There are restrictions as to the size of arts, the asset reference token. So if an art's quarterly average number of value and transactions per day rise above 1 million transactions and 200 million euros per day, the issuer should stop issuing any more arts and present a plan to reduce the number below those thresholds to the authorities, and the plan that the art issuer will propose to the authority needs to be approved, and the art will only be able, the issuer of the arts will only be able to continue issuing arts if the average transactions fall below those thresholds. There are also some exemptions relevant to e-money tokens. So as we mentioned before, e-money tokens can only be issued if you are a credit institution or an EMI institution. Okay, so the e-money directive provides for some exceptions on the licensing obligation. So in case you fall within the exceptions of the e-money directive, then you do not need to obtain a license to issue those e-money tokens. But issuers of exempted issuers of e-money tokens will still need to apply some of the provisions of MiCA, such as the preparation of a white paper. MiCA also introduces the concept of significant arts and EMTs. So if you are an issuer of an art or EMT, you may be deemed significant when certain criteria are met, such as large customer base, high market capitalization, and large number of transactions. And this is because EMTs and arts may influence monetary policy, so authorities want to have some control. In case you qualify as a significant arts or e-money tokens, you will be subject to much more strict requirements, for example, higher capital requirements, interoperability requirements, and liquidity management, and will most likely fall directly under supervision by the European Banking Authority. Finally, algorithmic stable coins. So you may have stable coins that their value and is maintained through and designed through and maintained through specific algorithms. So generally those are within scope of MiCA and not excluded. But in case that you issue an algorithmic crypto asset that doesn't really stabilize the value of the crypto assets by referencing one or other crypto assets, so you will not qualify, let's say, as an art or EMT, you will be qualifying as a utility token, and those provisions should apply. So generally, algorithmic stablecoins fall within the scope unless they are basically the crypto asset is designed as such where there is no backup with the relevant assets. In that case, you will qualify as a utility token and need to apply the provisions of utility tokens. So we have seen some of the requirements of MiCA with respect to the issuers of crypto assets. We have seen the different types of digital assets or crypto assets that MiCA defines and differentiates. We have seen that we have three types of crypto assets: the asset reference token, which is a crypto asset that purports to maintain a stable value by referencing specific assets. E-money tokens that are crypto assets that purports to maintain a stable value by referencing an official currency, and other utility tokens, which are basically crypto assets that provide access to goods and services that are issued that are provided by the issuer. So all those requirements that we saw relate to when somebody wants to issue crypto assets. So if you are an organization that believes that it's a good idea to go out there in the market and issue a crypto asset through an ICO, the initial coin offering, depending on the crypto asset that you plan to issue, specific rules will apply to you that we saw. So now the next session will move to the requirements of MiCA in relation to the service providers. So those that provide services to clients on crypto assets. So possibly, most likely, most of you will be interested more on this part, and you will most likely are not involved in the issuance of crypto assets, but servicing clients on existing crypto assets. So a crypto asset service provider means a legal person whose occupation and business is a provision of services relating to crypto assets on a professional basis. and that has been authorized by MiCA as such. MiCA lists 10 types of crypto asset services that CASPs can offer. Okay, so if you are providing custody and administration of crypto assets on behalf of clients, you will have to be authorized under MiCA for providing that service. If you are an operator of a crypto exchange on crypto assets, so you will need to be authorized as a CASP for that service. If you exchange crypto assets for funds, then again, this is one of the activity falling within the CASP regime of MiCA. Or if you exchange crypto assets with other crypto assets, again, this is an activity that falls within the scope of CASPs. If you execute orders on behalf of clients to purchase, let's say, crypto assets, this is an activity that falls under MiCA, including the reception transmission of orders. If you place crypto assets, again, this is one of the activities captured. If you provide investment advice on crypto assets, this is, again, a regulated activity falling under MiCA and under the CASP regime, or portfolio management, or providing transfers for crypto assets on behalf of clients. So you can see that a lot of those services, those of you who are familiar with MiFID and the MiFID investment services, these services are very similar. Some of, at least, of these services are very similar to those MiFID services. And let's look at some important terminology and definitions, basically, on some of the services we saw. So if you providing custody and administration of crypto assets on behalf of clients would mean to safekeep or control on behalf of clients their cryptographic keys. Okay, so if you are running a hot wallet, okay, so, and store on behalf of your clients, and you are the holder of that wallet, and you maintain on that wallet the cryptographic keys of the crypto assets belonging to your customer, you are providing then the activity of custody. The exchange of crypto assets for funds means the conclusions of purchase or sale contracts concerning crypto assets with clients for funds by using proprietary capital. Okay, the same applies if you exchange crypto assets with other crypto assets. In relation to the provision of transfer services of crypto assets, will mean to provide service to transfer crypto assets on behalf of one person to another person. So from one distributed ledger address to another. So if you are involved in instigating transfer of specific crypto assets from one wallet address to another, that means you are involved in this activity. Now, so we've seen what the services of CASP are and what CASP can offer. Who can offer now these services? So if you are a credit institution, investment firm, a market operator, an EMI, a usage management company, you could provide those services in relation to crypto assets under MiCA without necessarily going through a full authorization process. You will need to notify your authority and provide specific information to them regarding the activity you plan to do, which I think this is kind of a game changer based on the current situation, because as we mentioned in the very beginning, banks, investment firms, and EMI were largely excluded from offering services in relation to crypto assets. So now MiCA provides legally for the possibility that such entities to provide their services in relation to crypto assets. And you will be deemed as CASP as per MiCA if you are such an entity, and be subject to most of MiCA's requirements. Now, if you are not such an entity and you want to provide any of the CASP services, you need to set up a fresh company and you need to apply for an authorization as a CASP in the member state where your company is established. And MiCA provides for the possibility, obviously, to passport your services across the EU, either via the freedom of establishment, meaning that you can provide your services remotely on a cross-border basis, or you can set up, for example, branches in other member states and provide your services through there. There are exceptions on the need to be authorized as a CASP under MiCA. So MiCA is not, authorization as a CASP is not required for providing custody and administration of utility tokens or for providing transfer services in relation to utility tokens when those utility tokens are exempt from MiCA. So we saw in slides 19 and 20, we spoke about airdrops and rewards, right? Or when when you issue utility tokens for free, or you provide rewards automatically to clients for assisting in the distributed ledger technology. So those utility tokens we said were exempted, right? So if you provide custody and administration or transfer services exclusively for such types of utility tokens, then you do not need to obtain authorization under MiCA, unless there is another offer to the public on the same crypto asset that does not benefit from an exception, or whenever that exempted utility token has been admitted for trading. Okay, so if it has been admitted for trading on an exchange, that crypto asset, then you offer services, you need to on that utility token, you need to obtain authorization as a CASP. Electronic money institutions can provide custody services in relation to the e-money tokens that they issue without the need to have a CASP license. Okay. Now, you may have seen certain providers who offer crypto payments. So let's say you can go to different merchants, okay, and provide them with a point of sale system, a machine, so that they can accept payments from their customer using cryptos. So you may have seen before going to a cafe and they may allow the paying for the goods that they offer, right, with cryptos, and the merchant receives the fiat currency. So you go to a cafe, you order a coffee, it's €2, let's say, and you tap your wallet which stores some cryptos, right, on it, and you get charged the equivalent amount of €2 based on the value of your cryptos. So in that case, there may be possibly payment services involved under the Payment Services Directive. So if a crypto asset service provider somehow is also involved in providing payment services, then he will need to be authorized as a payment institution as well, or use a third party that is authorized to provide payment services. So let's now look at very briefly some of the obligations that CASPs have under MiCA. So if you are providing exchange services and execution services. You need to obviously provide best execution, similar to the obligations that the investment firm have at the moment. You need to provide for certain sustainability disclosures to your clients based on the crypto assets that you provide services to, risk warnings. You need to maintain records. You have the obligation to act honestly, fairly, and professionally in the best interest of the clients. Make your pricing, cost, and fee policy public to your clients. Provide clear and fair and not misleading information to client. Crypto assets and funds you collect from your clients need to be safe kept into designated clients' accounts and be separated from your own funds. You have prudential requirements. You have governance arrangements. If you are a cash, you need to have complaints handling procedure. If you are outsourcing part of your activities or functions, you have specific obligations. You need to identify and manage your conflict of interest. You need to conclude agreements, written agreements with clients. In case you need to have a wind down plans in case that you plan to close the business. You have to do reporting to the authority and to the clients. And you are also, MiCA also creates a liability, legal liability regime for the information given, but as well as the assets that the cash hold in custody on behalf of its clients in, let's say, the case of loss. And obviously you have market abuse obligations that we will cover a bit later. So obviously we are not going into detail explaining each obligation and the requirements. We'll need a full day to cover in detail everything. Just highlighting the titles here of the requirements. Also MiCA introduces the concept of significant CASPs. So there could be possibility to be designated as significant CASP in case a crypto asset service provider has at least 15 million active users on average in a calendar year. And those CASPs will need to notify their competent authorities when they become significant. Okay, and provide certain information. Those authorities will relay the information to ESMA actually, and ESMA may intervene and may limit the further growth or request to minimize the CASP activity. Other matters related to CASP. So we said that e-money tokens and arts cannot offer to the holders interest rates, right? The same will apply for CASP. You cannot offer to in relation to your services related to arts or EMTs interest rates. The exchange of crypto assets for funds or other crypto assets when made by the issuer or offerer, should not be designated as a crypto asset service. Okay, and we talked about in the beginning, that retail holders have the right to withdraw from the utility token subscriptions that they make, right? So a CASP, when they place such utility token, need to provide to their clients such rights of withdrawal. So that concludes the presentation in terms of CASPs. So let's quickly look at some other matters that MiCA introduces. There is no ban of proof of work mining in MiCA. There was a lot of debate whether this will be included. Eventually it was not, but there is important sustainability disclosures that need to be done by issuers and CASPs, okay? And they need to consider when issuing crypto assets, the technology used for the issuance of the crypto assets the issuers need to consider deploying environmentally friendly solutions and consider the adverse impact to the environment and provide for the necessary disclosure at this cut. There will be a lot of further information to be issued in that area. We talked about that CASP need to have procedures and policies for market abuse. So we have seen market abuse being a concept in financial instruments. The same will apply here, but it creates its own rules. Some of them resemble those rules that exist in the financial markets. So the rules for market abuse relates to crypto assets that are admitted to trading. So if it's not admitted to trading publicly, then obviously those rules will not apply. And those rules include lawful disclosures of inside information, prohibition for insider dealing, unlawful disclosure of insider information. Market manipulation is forbidden, of course, and rules for the prevention detection of market abuse, both by crypto exchanges. So if you are operating a crypto exchange, you need to have rules and procedure to detect and prevent market abuse. Or if you are a CASP offering your services in relation to listed crypto assets, you need to make sure that you detect market abuse and report it. Similar to the rules applied to investment firms and banks when they offer services in relation to listed financial instruments. So that concludes really MiCA from my side. The last part I wish to cover with you is the travel rule. So we talked about the recast transfer of fund regulation. So the so-called travel rule that already applies to traditional finance will now also apply to crypto assets. So when you transfer crypto assets from one wallet to another, information will need to travel. Okay, so that information will include the beneficiary and the source of the asset. So and will need to be stored accordingly. Information will need to be stored accordingly by the person engaging in the transfer. So let's say a CASP that maintains a custody in custody certain crypto assets for his client, gets an instruction from one of its clients to transfer a crypto asset to another wallet address. So that CASP will need to, during that transfer, it will need to accompany that transfer with specific information, and both receivers, right, of that cryptos will need to store the receiver of that crypto as well as the instigator of the transfer will need to hold the information relating to that transfer. So also when you execute transaction on crypto ATMs, again, the travel rule will apply. The rules will not apply in case of private wallets. So a client has a private wallet, right, and instigates a transfer to another private wallet, the person-to-person transfer. So these rules will not apply. And CASP need to have in place policies and procedures to control and apply restrictions, such as actions to freeze the crypto assets when performing such crypto asset transfer, as per the different rules that apply in each country in case of suspicious activity, basically. So if you detect suspicious activity during a request for transfer, you will have to not execute that transfer, so restrict that transfer and freeze that transfer, possibly need to report it to authorities and wait to see the feedback. So from my side, this is all. I just want to make a quick wrap up before my colleague Kyriakos continue with the rest of the presentation. So so we saw what is MiCA. We have seen the different what the scope of MiCA includes, what it excludes. We have seen the different requirements MiCA applies for issuers of crypto assets, and the 3 different categories, and what each category is, what it includes, and what the requirements apply to each category. We have also seen the regime introduced for services related to crypto assets offered by CASPs, and what type of those, what activity CASP can perform. We have seen the requirements for market abuse, in sustainability disclosures, and also the travel rule, which now applies in relation to transfer of crypto assets. So obviously there is a lot of, MiCA is still a work in progress. There is a lot of technical aspects that need to be clarified and defined by ESMA and the EBA mostly. And of course, you know, today we didn't cover everything that MiCA provides, but it gives you a good understanding, I believe, in terms of what does MiCA intends to do, what it regulates, what it leaves to outside its scope, and some actions that existing players in the market need to be aware of and prepare, since very soon those that are involved in activities captured by MiCA's scope will need to comply with. So thank you from me, and I leave the floor to Kyriakos.
Thank you very much, Alexandros, for that very comprehensive presentation. I would like to remind everyone who is attending that if you have any questions, you can submit them using the Q&A tab. Let us know who you would like to tackle that question, and we will try to cover that at the end of the presentation if we have some time left. Now I'd like to introduce Mr. Kyriakos Christofidis. Kyriakos Christofidis is the head of Financial Services Department of MAP S.Platis. Kyriakos' past experience extends to supranational corporations in the oil and gas industry, alternative investment funds, and regulated entities under the Cyprus and United Kingdom's regulatory framework from a variety of senior management roles, such as director and head of compliance of large organizations. Kyriakos, the stage is all yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Matteo. Just I want to make sure that you can see the rest of the presentation, and also you can hear me.
Yes, I think everything is working well.
Okay, thanks. So thank you everyone for joining. I will be very brief because we're going to leave some time for questions. I will be very briefly going through the transitional measures, which they are already in place under MiCA. So just to have some context, we are talking for a piece of regulation which is considered to be one of the most innovative and also complex to navigate in our industry. However, it's also one that solves a lot of legal uncertainty, which was lurking around for years. So currently in the European Union, we're dealing with one of the largest cryptocurrency markets. Just only in the last year, we're talking about over $1 trillion United States dollars in digital assets that were moved around, which amounts approximately to 25-30% of the global activity. So MiCA and the transitional measures are very important, and the reason those are there is to ensure that there is continuity of the existing regulated activities that are taking place, okay, and what those firms should be doing, what are the time frames in order to become authorized, to become compliant under MiCA. So starting off with the rules in relation to public offering of crypto assets, as Alexandros mentioned, we have exceptions for asset reference tokens and also for e-money tokens. Those shall not apply to offers that ended before December 2024. Now, in cases that a crypto asset is admitted to trading before that date, then only a limited number of rules will apply. Specifically, we're talking about Articles 7 to 9 under MiCA, which is focused around the marketing requirements and what is the minimum information that we should be including. So there are still rules, but they are a bit limited. Now the usual marketing rules, as we know them, continue to apply, okay, even under the limited regime, such as having clear communication, such as notifying of any crypto asset white papers that need to be notified, and of course, any publication rules for any subsequent marketing taking place should be aligned, should be identical with the white paper, okay? So for issuers of asset reference token, other than, of course, credit institutions, that is a different regime, those may continue to do so until they are granted or refused an authorization pursuant to the Article 21 of MiCA. Now, this process of receiving approval or having a rejection has been modernized, okay? And there are, let's say, rigid deadlines in terms of the competent authorities' approach. So the competent authorities will need to respond under specific timeframes for any applications, okay? And also there is an escalation provision. So the competent authority has a right to refer a draft opinion in relation to the authorization to EBA and ESMA as to get their view. The same goes with EBA and ESMA themselves. They have specific deadlines as to the time they have to assess such opinions and ultimately decide whether an application will be approved or removed or rejected. Now, of course, the grounds for approving or refusing an application, they are very similar and they are in parallel of what Alexandros has mentioned, okay, in terms of the content that they should be including, okay, the issues should be including, and also the content of the white paper itself. So there, if we are talking about CASPs now, and those CASPs that have provided their services in accordance, for example, with the directive of registering CASP in Cyprus before the 13th of December 2024, they can continue to do so by 1st of July 2026, which by then they should be either receiving an approval under the new regime, under the MiCA regime, or receiving a refusal. In case, of course, such firms are rejected, it goes without saying that they cannot continue in carrying out any regulated activity. So for currently registered CASPs, now this is a very good provision actually, because this was a point of concern for a long time, whether the directive that we have under the Cyprus Securities and Exchange Commission will survive, let's say, the MiCA process. And it seems that there are provisions in place as to allow a more simplified authorization procedure. And of course, this gives value to already licensed CASPs, but also for interested parties that wish to register a CASP before MiCA goes live. Okay, so if we consider this approach, if we consider this provision of MiCA, I think it is a good time now to also consider whether you should be applying for a new license, for a new registration as a CASP, or whether if you're an existing CASP, should have implemented a plan, draft down a plan as to start complying with all those requirements, because definitely what we have in the directive is not the same of what MiCA is asking. So for non-registered CASPs and again crypto asset issuers, there is also a very good interpretation in terms of reverse solicitation. So there is a provision which allows the entities from outside the European Union, I'm referring to third country firms, to offer crypto asset services to clients within the European Union without needing authorization as a crypto asset service provider. However, the client initiates the service on their own initiative. So interested parties must be really careful because if it is identified that such entity originating from a third party is representing and actively seeks or solicits clients in the European Union, regardless of any means of communications that are used, then this service is no longer considered to be under the veil of client's exclusive initiative. So of course, we need to be careful because there are provisions in MiCA which ask ESMA, okay, to create a European Union-wide blacklist, which will include all the non-compliant entities or the entities that have exploited this provision. So some remarks about this transition that we have in front of us. Obviously, there is a heavy focus on the white paper. The white papers must be prepared in a machine-readable format. The content of the white paper, Alexandros mentioned about ESG and sustainability, while the proof of work consensus mechanism was not deemed to be let's say, illegal or incompatible with MiCA. There is, though, a suggestion from the European Parliament to include sustainability requirements, okay, to update the European Union ESG taxonomy regulation to cover also any crypto asset mining activities, requiring any white papers to include an independent assessment in terms of the energy consumption and the impact that comes along with such products, with such tokens. For example, a Bitcoin token, a Bitcoin transaction to be concluded takes around an excess of 700 kilowatt of energy, which is a huge number considering the market capitalization for Bitcoin and any other relevant tokens, okay, cryptocurrencies. So we need to be careful what we're providing to what we're including in our white papers and how those are addressed to the people. Because as mentioned before, we have a fiduciary duty. So whatever we write in them must represent the reality and what is happening, of course, with our clients. We may be having clients that have sustainability preferences. So this is something that we should be considering before providing any sort of crypto assets, any sort of tokens. So we need to be considering whether we are an exempt firm, whether or not, on the basis of what Alexandros discussed before. So the first step is to think whether MiCA is applicable for you or not. For this to happen, a gap analysis should take place, okay, capturing the whole business, the whole customer journey. If any changes need to happen, I like to say that it's already too late, so the plan should be in place as to be compliant by the December 2024. This also means readjusting our compliance framework, readjusting the procedures, the people, the systems, any client terms and conditions that we have in place, any agreements with any vendors. We need to be sure that they are drafted in a way which capture any underlying requirements under MiCA, and of course the white paper. The sustainability issues will be there. Okay, it is something that we need to be very careful. Liability issues, what we have discussed before, we need to be sure that what we include in our documentation, in our client-facing documents is indeed what we are doing. The reporting requirements, This will mean that we need to adjust our systems, the way that we collect and analyze information, the frequency, the input from the employees, and several other aspects, okay? Which means subsequently to change any business practices that need to be changed. Also, there were some comments from this ISEC. Very recently, the chairman himself mentioned that there is no tolerance to aggressive marketing. So this also captures any CASPs, any attempts to mass market any of the services. I don't think it will be taken with a good eye. Okay. For the 10 types of crypto asset services that Alexandros explained, we need to have in mind the use it or lose it. Okay, so we cannot be applying for services just for the sake of having those applied for in case we need them. We need to demonstrate that we are using them, that we have the clientele, we have the systems, the business plan in place, the financial soundness, and anything else that must be there, of course, to support our existing or future applications. Now, we suspect that going forward from July 2023, it will be an enhanced registration process with MiCA now being publicly available. The regulator will have, of course, will require for you to present evidence of robust IT systems, conflicts of interest policies, and other matters, of course, which we are happy to guide you through this process as we are doing with existing clients. And another comment from the regulator, which is good to keep in mind, is that the investors are not doing their homework correctly. At least they are not finding out if the entity is properly regulated or not. So during this transitional period, we need to be making the utmost to protect the investors. If we are an existing CASP, to have a process written down on how we become to tackle this regulatory issue, this authorization issue, or if you are planning to become a newly authorized CASP, it's good to capitalize on this. Okay, it's good to capitalize on the CASP register, on MiCA, because all these regulations together, all these directives, they build confidence in a market which, until very recently, it was highly unregulated. So some of the advantages of having a setup in Cyprus, I mean, if you look at the big players, they are here. They went through the authorization process, the registration process, sorry, from the Cyprus regulator. So this says something, okay? There is, of course, skilled and knowledgeable workforce available to use within your regulated entity, consultants, and any other professional service, any other people who provide professional services. There is an active crypto and IT tech community. There are several foundations, several bodies which they work very hard in establishing Cyprus as a place of innovation, as a place to attract new businesses. The regulator is very experienced. We have seen how the regulator reacted with cases such as the FTX, very proactive approach, safeguarding and protecting the investors, of course. Same goes with other big names that are in Cyprus. Okay, this says something about the regulator and the approach in general. In terms of costs and the relation to the quality of the professional services provided, Cyprus is at a very good analogy here. You are receiving a very good service, a professional service at a very competitive cost, but also the cost of having an office here, the cost of maintaining your operations here is far less compared to other jurisdictions in the European Union. So apart from that, there are also incentives from the government, which can help any interested party have their operation in Cyprus, move their operation in Cyprus. The government in general is very receptive in such arrangements, but also professional consultants such as ourselves who have been dealing with with regulated entities for years. So we're very happy to assist you in any way we can. So this concludes the presentation and my side. I will pass it over to Matteo now and save some time for Q&A, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Kyriakos, for your presentation. We have a few questions. I know that Alexandros already covered some of them in the chat, but for the benefit of everyone who is involved here, I'm going to read those out quickly. They shouldn't take too long, and we will wrap up in the next 5 minutes. One of the questions is admission to trading. Does it mean MiCA will regulate crypto exchanges? Does MiCA have this type of participants, or just those that provide access to exchanges, crypto service providers? Alexandros, I know you replied to that one on the chat. Do you want to just elaborate very quickly?
Yeah, thank you, Matteo. Yeah, of course, it regulates exchanges. As we saw, one of the activity of CASP is to operate an exchange. So if you want to run an exchange in Europe, you need to be a CASP authorized as such. And there are rules regarding the operation of an exchange, similar rules to what applies to traditional exchanges for financial services and for financial products. So yeah, it will regulate the exchanges and the activity that goes on there.
Excellent, thank you. Another one, this is more a clarification, I guess, but the question is, if I understood correctly, an investment firm may provide services provided by a CASP under MiCA without the need to incorporate a new company and obtain a separate authorization. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Of course, the services, the MiCA services that an existing investment firm can offer needs to correspond to the existing license of the investment firm. So if you are not authorized, let's say under MiFID, to operate an exchange, you will not be able to, by the authorities, to operate a crypto exchange and for crypto assets. Also, even though the regulation says notification at the moment, so just notifying the authorities, I doubt that authorities will only want to just get a notification and then allow the firm to provide that. Probably there will be some sort of an informal approval. Of course, I don't expect this to be similar to the one with that other entities which are not currently authorized will need to go through. It will be much simplified procedure given the equivalence and the higher standards that in traditional investment firms or banks maintain. So, but it remains to be seen. We have to see, as I mentioned, there will be a lot of things being clarified through level 2, level 3 regulatory measures soon.
Excellent. And one final question, I guess, for the two of you. This is a question about the UK. Is there an equivalent regulation in the UK? Will the UK follow the same approach or regulation? Any thoughts on that?
Yep. Thank you. I can take that. So the FCA has recently, actually a month ago, provided some clarity to the interested parties. No, it will not be. First of all, MiCA is not applicable to the FCA and the UK regulatory regime. Currently, there is an AML registration which takes you through a process similar to a crypto asset service provider registration. However, the current approach of the regulator, due to lack of a clear requirement, of a clear threshold of how these entities can be licensed, is sitting on around 90% rejection rate. However, the last 3 weeks, if I'm correct, FCA have brought forward in public their approach, their business plan in terms of authorizing such firms, which gives much more clarity. And unofficially, I see a lot of similarities to MiCA in terms of the minimum requirements, in terms of travel rule requirements, and also the separation of specific categories of tokens.
Excellent. I think that brings us to the end.
Matteo, I
Yes,
think there's another question.
oh, there's one.
Just
Yes,
yeah.
let me actually pose that quickly, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Yeah.
But the question here is, it just came in. Can a crypto point of sale provide services with only CASP authorization? The point of sale will not facilitate fiat transactions. Alexandros?
It's a good question, to be honest. So you have a point of sale system that the merchant will basically receive cryptos. And whether the question basically lies as to whether that kind of activity will be considered as a payment service, effectively. Yeah, I'm not very sure. It's these parts are not clarified at all in MiCA. We parts regarding the overlap between transfer of crypto assets and when some of the activity falls within payment services, etc., to be covered through level 2 and level 3 measures, including Q&As by SMAT. So I'll try to skip providing a view on this at the moment, not to prejudice somebody, since this is still very early to determine.
Perfect. We have one more, and I'll throw this one out there, and then I promise we will end this. It's been a long session. I know people are busy. So the question here is, could you please briefly comment on marketing of crypto funds? Do entities or natural persons need a different specialized license to promote a crypto fund? Any thoughts on that?
So Daxela, take it, Kira.
I will comment only on the FCA side, because I suspect this question may be relevant to the UK market as well. So under the UK, there is a new financial promotions regime. Actually, it's been out there for a while now, which requires any firms carrying out any sort of marketing activity in the concept of financial promotions to be authorized, to be registered with the FCA. Now, for the CASP side of things, I don't think a separate entity should be established, but I will leave it to Alexandros in case he wants to top up on this.
So you mean to create a fund? So if we're talking about a fund with which will qualify as a UCITS or an alternative investment fund. So, but anyway, UCITS, I don't believe they can invest in cryptos. But let's say an alternative investment fund that qualifies as an alternative investment fund in Europe that invests in cryptos, basically, right? I think that kind of structure already exists. So as we said, MiCA is a gap filling regulation. So if an activity is already falling within the scope of some of the existing regulations, whether that be banking activities, fund management, investment services, payment services, etc. So MiCA is not there to complement any gaps in those regulations in terms of activity not capturing those regulations. So I would say that in case your fund is a qualified fund that falls within the scope of AIFM, let's say, that is merely investing crypto assets, so I wouldn't say it falls into the scope of MiCA in this case. But I'm not so sure, because we don't have information on what structure you want to set up when the question mentions fund. So we need to see the details. So it may be something that resembles a fund but is not a fund, and therefore may be out of scope of the current regulation and be within the scope of MiCA. So because there is a fine details in many cases. So So remains to be seen.
Right. Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much, both Kyriakos and Alexandros, for this very comprehensive, I guess,
Thank
introduction
you
to
for your
MiCA.
participation,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you very
Mateo.
much. I'll get some admin
Bye-bye.
issues out of the way and say goodbye. Basically, everyone, this has been recorded, and we will be providing a recording and also the slides to everyone who attended within the next few days. And if you have any questions, follow-up questions with Kyriakos or Alexandros, you can get in touch with them via email, etc., with S.Platis. So on behalf of S.Platis, I want to thank everyone for attending and hope to see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.